Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar Gender Gap, the Impact on Social Security Systems in the Americas. A special welcome to our panelists. I think that in this data is the commemoration for the approval for the 102 agreement for the ILO between the topic for gender gap within the social security themes. This is very important for us. And is mainly known for the great differences that are produced. Sometimes the consequence for the labor market behavior due to discrimination or a culture that the people try to eradicate. So we were talking about a topic, a very important topic. I will say that it is a topic for justice. It is a topic that invites institutions that make part of this conference also for all countries, governments, to join efforts within the communities to delete the existing gaps. Our three experts will be referred to this topic. And all the steps that we have taken, all the steps that we have to do in the future. Women's role, it's very important in our society. Women in charge of the care, they have been not protected. So we have to adopt all measures and to take all the appropriate tools and formulate policies and adjust institutions to enhance the situation that is being unacceptable. So I would like to welcome particularly for all people who are joining us today remotely. And also for all panelists that they will explain us on we have the ways that we have to take towards this topic that allow that all member institutions, specifically for social security institutions, may adopt effective mechanisms to diminish or delete totally these gaps. Thank you very much. I hope you the success to this webinar, and I will pass the floor for Dr. Gwendolyn Bravo, which is a coordinator for the research and technical assistance of the Inter-American Center for Social Security Center. She will be the monitor and she will present our panelist. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor. I will also want to welcome our panelists by accepting this invitation to this webinar. As our CIESS director mentioned before, this is a topic that we cannot close our eyes due to this process. And the CIESS, we tend to encourage these topics during this new administration, which is being held by Dr. Carrasco. I also want to welcome to all people who are connected to this webinar and for your interest to be registered in this activity. I will present our first panelist, which is Dr. Mariana Marchiani. She is a senior researcher of the Center of Distributive Labor and Social Studies at the Universidad Nacional de La Plata. She has a PhD in economics from the Universidad Nacional de La Plata, and she was a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of British Columbia in Canada. She's a full-time professor and the director of the master program in economics of the Economy Faculty, Universidad de La Plata. She teaches on the graduate and graduate courses in econometrics. She's also a researcher of the National Council of the Scientific and Technical Research, and she was a visit teacher for the Universidad República in Uruguay and the University for Nashville in Sweden. She has expert in economics of education, gender economics, and social policies, and she has published numerous published articles in academic journals. Thank you very much, Dr. McCanny. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Wendelin. Can you listen to me? I'm I'm very pleased to be here with you. I will share my presentation with you. I'm very pleased to be here. I thank you the invitation from CIESS because I think that is very important that we can have this space to talk about these topics. My presentation will be for the gender gaps in Latin America. The first idea is to give you a framework for inequality, gender inequalities framework in Latin America labor markets in the region. So I will provide you some evidence for the investigations that have made done in the CIESS, which is in research coordinator investigation center in University de La Plata. So these some words that are of this article. We have here the reference and some other research articles that I will talk about during this webinar. In general, all the information that we're showing you today is some data that come from the Genlog database base that are the initiative that we have here within the study center. So I will leave you here the link if you're interested to learn more about this. This database have many indicators that we elaborate within the gender inequality, and also to make a part of all the region numbers, and also health, demography, and values. What we do here is an important work for harmonization, so this data can be comparable. And also, we provide some courses that are relevant for the gender gap monitoring for all women in the region. And also, for example, the typical court from gender, and also for a marital era, the situation in the household. So some indicators that can be monitored to gender gap in the region. So I invite you to visit or to learn more in this website. And you can also upload this document from this site. So the style of this presentation is to talk about what happened in the region. We don't have much time to talk about all the generalities, but I will talk about what the average things that happen in the region for the gender population in an active level. So country average of the region is adults between 25 and 54 years old. This is important people group. So these gender gaps that we can see here is gender gaps are strictly linked to the labor work. So we can recognize here the great advances from on labor markets for women in Latin America. So we're going back to last 60 years. So we had a participation rate for women in the labor market in Latin America of 20%. So 2 out of 10 women participate in labor markets in last years, 60 years. And also this number triplicate. So we have more than 60% who participate in the labor market. So we have a great advancement in a lower time. So it is a good news. And also, there are only gender gaps persist. So this labor market participation for women is from 69% in comparison for men percentage in 94%. It is clear that we'll only have a gap that we have to tackle. So we have 25 points within the labor market for the labor participation in the labor market. And this magnitude to the gender gap is greater. So let me show you what happened in Latin America and the rest of the world. So this is the data that I come from the World Development Indicators. because they have many indicators for other regions. So we only focus in Latin America. The orange bar represents this gender gap in participation, as I mentioned before, in our region. And the only three regions that goes up from the gender gap is Middle East and South Asia. This is due to the culture and the religion things that can have less rate for a labor market for women because women cannot participate in the labor market. So if we can compare Latin America with other regions where gaps are greater, 26 points as we mentioned before, versus East Asia and the Pacific with 17 points, Europe and Central Asia with 16 points, and Africa Sub-Sahara 13. So we have a context with our region with a great gender gaps. The average gender gap is very huge. So in our region, we have a greater gender gaps in our region. For example, what happened when we have Latin America people, so there are a larger gap in population with a lower educational level. So this is what this graph shows. So in the vertical, we have the labor participation. The orange bars represent men, labor participation for men, and green bars represent participation for women in these three educational levels. So in this first gap, it is are the people who only complete primary education, and the second one who complete secondary education, and the third one to complete the higher education. So in the first one, we can see how the women participation is higher than women, independently for the educational level, because the participation for men cannot change from the educational level. We have here 96 or 97%, while the women participation still change. Is it lower from men? So we have many changes from the educational level. So we have a lower educational level for women. So this is why the gender gap, it's like 37 points. So it is greater for the group for a complete lower educational level. And we also have differences for our group for familiar structures. If we compare people without children from the left bars versus people with children younger than 6 years old. So these are children who are younger to complete the primary school. The same participation for men are almost similar, and women are different, or they differ from men. So we can see that the women participation can contract. So this is the case where women have children. This is the case where men doesn't have children. So what does the association do, as you mentioned before? So the gap between participation in the labor market and children in their households, and also the thing that what women do in their households. So if women don't work, where are they? So we will talk about of this contrast: work in the market versus household work. Children care takes longer time from families, and I want to highlight this word. Families are the ones who have to take care of children, but we know that historically, and we already see here that the responsibility goes to for women. So what happened for this demand of responsibility, demand of care that women are in charge for? So they reduce their participation in the labor market, and they leave the market, and they participate less in the market, and also participate but with less intensity. They can work with lower hours. So the thing here in the region that men work double hours versus women, but women work for unpaid work in the household. So let me show you now the example for in Mexico. that shows what we were talking. So this is the data for Mexico in 2019, 2018. The first two lines in this table showed that men and for women, the women in the second line. So how they can distribute their time. So we can show that women and men that were in the work, how many time, how many hours they work in the market, and how many hours they work in weekly hours, in care activities, in household for unpaid work. So you can see here that men work in an average 11 hours, but women work more than 20 hours in household taking care of children, for children or other partners. So we can see here how many hours per week of total work, considering labor market and plus household work, that men and women, we can see that women work more hours. And in the last rows, we can simulate comparison, but we have here men and women with children younger than 5 years. So the gap of labor hours are increasing. So we have here in an average, women can work 11 works more in comparison with men, but we see the women with children, women work 17 more hours than men. We're talking about Mexico situation. So this happens in most of countries. We can see here in this gap, the green bar, the hours that are for unpaid work is almost all countries for all the work that the men take for their work. So for all the time that women work, they mostly work in unpaid within the labor market. So we can see here is what are the presence of children in the house can create this resignation for activities in women in the labor market, from work to their household. And also because they have the necessity or the need to take care of their children. And there are many evidence that the greatest impact or this impact in the labor market and household activities occurs with the first child. So we have here the maternity effects, or also in the literature. So I will have to talk about some research investigations that we have made from the maternity impact on the labor results for women in the region. So where we're talking about now, this is a reference from some co-authors. So, but this is a word for Chile. So after this, I will show you that this happens in almost all countries. But we are starting with Chile because it's a Chile that we get the best data to present this. So these results, we used this graphic. So let me just talk about this, how to interpret this graphic. I hope that you can see my cursor. So in the horizontal axis, we have a timeline. The timeline has a 0 and also from a vertical line that shows the year of the birth, the year where the first child got birth. So we have the previous years from right to left. So after the years of the first birth of the first child. So we can do here is to evaluate how all these labor trajectories progress within men and men. Orange lines are represented men and the green ones represent women. How all these lines progress during the time, and what happened during this time? What happened when the first child, we have the childbirth? So what happened when these people get parents? So this methodology is best known of the events methodology. And what happens here in this case that the graphic is for the employment. So we can see here the vertical axis. They change relative event time in relation to the first child. So we have here a drop down for the employment rate. So the employment rate goes to 22% negative, but not for the men. So let's see the green line for women. So there is a loss, a greatest loss for employment with the first childbirth. And women cannot be recovered in the future. So after many years, they can be recovered. So we're talking about a great unemployment for women and a great uh, employment gender gap. Now, for women who are not going or leave the work in the market after the first childbirth, also we can see that there is a maternity effect within the working hours. We can see here how many hours, the same as the previous one, but can see here that how the hours drop down in the labor market for women who are still work after the first childbirth. And women when cannot see here changes for them. So let's see that the changes are persistent with maternity during the time. So they're maintained. So we can see here with this difference within our working hours, there is a movement from women from part time from complete time work. So it implies not only a drop down for hours and remuneration, but also other kind of issues or other kind of employments because they can work in an unpaid or with other perspective with a less career professional development. Besides this, there is something else that is happening between maternity that they are going between from paid or informal labor markets, they are going to informal labor markets. So we have here 38% higher percent for informal employment. That is directly for this topic we are talking about today, that is concerning to the social security. So in which the women cannot be recovered. So women are going to unpaid work, and also, they are just doing work of this informal or formal work that we already know that they don't have any protection or social protection, and also low or labor laws for their income. And this interpretation is that we are looking for flexibility for informal workers. Uh, Formal workers are more flexible than unpaid or informal work. So in this market, in consequence for the maternity, they pass to the part-time works, and this can affect all income. And this is what we can see here in this graphic. So we can see here that there was a drop down into women income for 30%, and they cannot be recovered. And also for men, they happen nothing for women. What happened what happened here in Chile happened also for all the region. This is a work that we are doing right now with a colleague. So you can see here that how this pattern that I described before only for Chile is a repeat in all countries in the Latin American region. So we can see here in the case in Mexico, how the income dropped down is 34% for the income loss due to the paternity. In Argentina, we can see here that we are having a 27% loss. So this is happening in all countries. In relation to income loss, and also for all the monetary tax, there are some other consequences within the maternity impact and also for the economic autonomy, lower future career prospects for women, as mentioned before, of the kind of work they work in after maternity, lack of social security coverage for all women who leave the work or they can't start working in informal environment, and also dependency in old age. So these women cannot have the right to receive any dependency. And this all is together for the independencies for women to make their own decisions. So they were talking about empowerment for women. So just to summarize this discussion, as we can see here in a vicious circle in the gender gaps, starting for the upper circle in gray, we can start from reality that historically and due to the culture, We have been seeing some advances and updates from the excessive household responsibilities for women, and also particularly for the care. After this, women need to enjoy more free time. How they have free time just to low labor force, or for to be more flexible employments, female employments, formal or part-time employment. And also, this comes to the lack of economic independence and empowerment for women, that this reaffirmation of stereotypes and traditional gender roles that can take this gap to be encircled. To finish off this dynamic and also to conclude this culture changes in the region, because we need public policies. I almost finished, so I would like to make a reflection of this. So what happened with this politics for this region? So we have to ease women's to time restrictions. There's also participation for women in labor markets. The first one is to ease women's time restrictions. The second one is to promote co-responsibility at home. And there is some evidence that from many experiences in the world that have been successful. So let me just show that the most important that make more consciousness about that contribute to this session. The first one is to expansion of to expansion of care services offering. So how the family can provide care for family. This refers to nurseries and kindergartens, extended school days. All these services are not enough from some Latin America countries, where when they are present, sometimes they are not accessible for a population because they are very expensive, or many times they are private. So what we have here is to expand the offering and also to make this offering accessible and with good quality in public. Other of these licenses for maternity or leave maternity for care also. We have to take care more about this because some evidence is a mixture between the leave politics and also to promote the participation of women in gender equality. Why? Because it depends on how the policies are designed. They have shown good results, but they have not have good results, or they have contrary results from the ones we are expected. For example, they have a leave, maternity leaves that they have been more extended that can be it can damage. So they have to employ some women. So there are many range of these leaves. The leaves have to be balanced, and also we have to get non-transferable licenses for each parent, or so they have a surveys that those of something that we have to take into account for to develop these political policies. In other words, it is very necessary to make emphasis into the sexual education for family planification. There are evidence that comes to demography and health service throughout the region. So there are certain sections where maternity with less labor education, they are very effective gender for fecundity. So what happens here is that there is less of access to education or to media to planify to have a family. And just to conclude, to not to put this all to the government, it is important to implement some programs that organizations can provide some works to these things. So we have to have great flexibility at work for men and women. We have here the experience for the pandemic. So this experience for the pandemic have make us to learn about it, and also to have some possibilities to improve or to have more flexible works, not to increase productivity. So we have to have the greater flexibility at work for men and women to enhance the responsibility in household and to reduce gender gaps. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Marconi, for your presentation. I think we have a clear vision and a base of what happening of this gender gap in the region, mainly in the labor market, and how public policies can be focused into this women insertion. So they can have insertion into the formal labor market, not the informal market, to apply politic policies to enforce these flexibility work hours, and that the maternity can it doesn't mean a sacrifice for this integration into a labor market for women. And also, what I think that what is important here is a responsibility in work and the household hours within family team members, because the gender gap is going closing in the region, so it represents a great goal for this region. Thank you very much, Doctor, for your participation. And I would like to invite all people who are joining us today, if you have any question, you can leave it in the chat section at the end of the session. So we will have a Q&A session for all our experts. And also we can remember that we are having a interpretation, simultaneous interpretation right now. The next presentation will be into English. So we have right now the interpretation. Now I will go into the next expert, which is Nana Oyeke Byrne. She has a master in economic and social economics and gender expert within 6 years. For the Gales University from United Kingdom, she has an economic degree with a right degree for Indian Pennsylvania in the United States. She's executive director for a sustainable development solutions. She's expert with more than 26 years of international experience acquired in the Caribbean, Africa, United Kingdom, and the Americas. She has also worked with the government and international organizations in Trinidad and Tobago. She's a member from the International Feminist Economist and the Association for Social Economic and Caribbean. She's director from the violence fight against violence for domestic householding, and also for women Caribbean in the leadership. Thank you very much, Ms. Lana, to accept this invitation. And I provide you the next floor for your presentation.
Afternoon, everyone, or good morning to you in Mexico City. I bring you greetings from the English-speaking Caribbean, and it's a pleasure for me to participate in this conference. My task today is to look at gender in the labor market, the Caribbean experience. I have 20 minutes, so I will try my best to stick within the time. I will be talking to you this day about the Caribbean economy, projections made for 2023. I'll also talk about growth areas using a case study country, and then the implications on economic and social development. I know there's interpretation, so I'll speak a little slower for the interpreter to be able to get the message across. ECLAC, just this month, released GDP growth rates projections for 2023. As you can see, with the exception of Guyana, what this data tells us is that the highest growth projection is 9.5 for Antigua and Barbuda, and the lowest, it seems, is Suriname, which is 2.3. The three top growth countries are going to be Antigua and Barbuda at 9.5 GDP growth, Grenada Guyana, we're excluding Guyana in this projection. So Grenada comes next, which is 5, and the Bahamas, 4.3. Since Antigua and Barbuda, with the exclusion of Guyana, seems to be the top country in the Caribbean to increase its growth, we're going to take Antigua and Barbuda as our case study. The government of Antigua and Barbuda, the Honorable Prime Minister Gaston Brown, in his 2023 budget speech, said that there was going to be a stronger revenue for performance because of what happened in 2022. And this was due to the fact that the government's policies, particularly in tourism, construction, and housing, performed well. And so with that in mind, one has to ask oneself, so who works in the tourism, construction, and housing sector? Because these were the sectors that did well in 2022. Antigua's latest labor force survey from the Statistics Division is in 2018. They're in the process of conducting a new labor force survey. Now, what you can see, if we take tourism, although they don't have employment by the tourism area, we can use the hotel sector, hotel and restaurants. And here, what you can see is that the sector has more women. When you look at more men and women, we have more women in the hotel sector. When you also look at the construction sector, it is the sector that has the largest disparity when it comes to men and women working in that sector. The next sector, which we can relate to housing, the other sector that was deemed to perform well in 2022, and so we can likely say will be part of the growth areas for 2023, is real estate. And as you can see with my cursor, there you also have more men participating in that sector. Participants of this conference, we just came through the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you would recall, a lot of sectors were closed. A major sector that was closed was tourism, when folks could not travel in between countries. And then we are also facing with a region that is very vulnerable to climate change. And so you ask yourself, if these are the figures of Antigua and Barbuda's growth sectors projected in a vulnerable location in the world due to pandemics or climate change, then if we don't have an economy that is stable, because if we should have another issue, another pandemic, and that sector is closed, what is going to happen to the men and women who work in that sector? And here you can see the hotel industry has more women. And that sector really shut down during the pandemic. Construction is the sector that booms the highest after any climate issue that takes place in the Caribbean. Reconstruction is the biggest thing that happens. Yet, when we reconstruct our islands, taking Antigua and Barbuda here as the case study, that means a lot of money, projects income, opportunities for growth, livelihoods are enhanced. Yet, when you look at this sector, you have 15, almost 15 numbers here of men compared to probably 2 or so of women. This tells you that when there's opportunity to enhance livelihoods after a vulnerable situation, which is reoccurring more with climate change, women tend to be at a disproportionate advantage. When you look at real estate as well, which could be the housing sector, we see here, if you can see my cursor, while the gap seems to be a little bit more even compared to the construction sector, which is here, there you also see that we have more men participating in that sector. Well, one will ask, so what does this mean for socioeconomic situations in the Caribbean and also in Antigua and Barbuda? This data, which came from UN Women when it was looking at the post-COVID pandemic in the Caribbean, and it sourced this information from the National Statistics Office of Survey of Living Conditions, the IDB, Barbados Survey of Living Conditions as well in 2017, and UNICEF's Child Poverty in the Eastern Caribbean area report of 2017, and IDB's, the Bahamas Household Expenditure Survey in 2013. From this diagram, we can see that poverty is the highest in Dominica, followed by Suriname, then St. Lucia. Antigua and Barbuda comes after. Then you have Barbados. Sorry, we missed the British Virgin Islands earlier on. But we want to look at Antigua and Barbuda. That has 18.4% in terms of poverty. Now, this poverty rates were done, the region has not had another poverty study since the 2011-ish. But I think the Caribbean Development Bank is working with the region to amend this and work on the poverty statistics that exist. And so here we have Antigua's poverty rate at 18.4. We have no idea what it will be, especially since COVID has taken place in the region, and we've had quite a number of vulnerable situations with Barbuda being hit by a hurricane and reconstruction still going on, what the poverty rate would look like. But I can tell you what happens in our region when you have situations such as this taking place. Our social safety nets are weak. Weak to the extent that sometimes the economies cannot support the vulnerable. And so when COVID-19 hit, I can tell you in Trinidad and Tobago, where I live, a mother who I met had to juggle whether she was going to work all week, leaving the children at home with a cell phone that she had for them to go to school online. Not every child went to school every day. when school was online. A child would go to school one day and another would not, because the device that was used for online school was the mother's cell phone. I know there are people in the region who are still waiting for subventions that were promised from the COVID-19 pandemic. Why is this important that I talk about it? It's important because our inequalities within the region inequality is a very real situation. The gap between the have and the have-nots is evident. When you walk through the vulnerable communities and you see in 2023, folks taking a shower at a standpipe, while the very rich are in their high-walled buildings and multilateral banks are showcasing growth interest rates of so high an amount, you ask yourself, are these multilateral companies contributing effectively to bridge the gap that exists within the Caribbean? I'm hoping that we can have a good discussion about it, because there are a lot of companies, multi-international companies that work in the region. And I would love to see what percentage of their profits they put in their CSR programs, which is corporate social responsibility programs. While we have a long way to go, policies need to be put in place to support the most vulnerable, who tend to be in a position that should any climate issue take place in our region, they go way beyond the poverty line. In summary, we can see that there is a low participation of women in the high income areas of Antigua and Barbuda. This means the government of Antigua and Barbuda needs to work holistically with private sector, with civil society organizations, and with other government departments to make sure that no one is left behind. No one is left behind for the women who can have an opportunity in the construction sector that has the largest gap when it comes to men and women. Yet we know that is the sector that also receives a lot of subventions for reconstruction and a lot of opportunities for livelihoods to be enhanced. Also, what we would realize is that while the hotel industry, which is the tourism sector, has more women than men, it is a very precarious sector. Precarious to the extent that when the pandemic hit, they were closed. And so jobs were not available, especially for those who had to work on a daily basis, who were paid according to the number of hours that they worked. Additionally, when you look at our vulnerability to climate change, whenever a hurricane passes through, nobody's coming to visit the Caribbean because we are not open for business during a hurricane and we're shut down. And so the government needs to diversify its economy and look at other sectors where growth can still take place irrespective of vulnerability to climate change. Small industries need to increase. Opportunities where livelihoods can be sustained outside the tourism sector. And then we also need to look at our weak social protection systems. According to the climate change scientists, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. This then means we need to strengthen our social protection systems, because the vulnerable will continue to be vulnerable if we do not address the root causes that increases their vulnerability. I'm hoping that my short 20 minutes presentation has given us food for thought that will generate a lively discussion as we look ahead at the gender gaps that exist within the Latin America and the Caribbean region. And I look forward to your questions and your inputs. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lana. I think that you have a great topic to this discussion, that is the gender gap. This is a great problematic that can be understood within structural changes for the Caribbean, for the case that you developed today. But in general, for the microanalysis that you presented for the microeconomical varieties, so we can see here that the gender gap is inserted into this economic gap, in which the pandemic-19 crisis or the same crisis takes a important role within the climate change. So also this climate change is important to know how they can affect or for the advancement to cut the gender gap. So we can see here that what are the main thing that we have to insert the women, the gender gap that they're talking about, the precarity for the labor market for the gender in the case of the Caribbean. Thank you very much for your exposition. Will take place for our list expositor for Dr. Marta Bustamante Vaca, which is lawyer from Universidad Externado de Colombia. She's specialized in labor law with a diploma in senior management from CIESS in Caracas, Venezuela. She holds a master in European project management in Madrid, Spain. She has experience in European projects to prevent gender-based violence in Madrid, in Bologna, Italy. Consultant certified to implement the Equity Seal Equipares and by the ILO score for good practices with a gender approach in companies. She's also a business consultant for the prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace. She's also a lecturer in several universities and companies on topics related to corporate social responsibility, decent work, international labor standards, and gender equality. Thank you very much. I pass the floor for Dr. Bustamante. Thank you very much for your participation. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for all panelists that talked before. I have many technical difficulties to share my presentation. Can you please share my presentation for me? Or maybe I can talk without the presentation. Doctor, sir. Let me just share your presentation. Please give me just 1 minute. Perfect. Thank you very much. I will just tell you when to change this slide. Thank you. We can see here that we have a great gender gaps that affect social security for women. And it is very very indispensable that that not only governments and all politics that have to do with social security, but also the private sectors and all society together, as we can see here that all conditions that already established for us to have conscious about the equality topics. So I would like to have introduction due to the time we have here to speak. So just to understand, so when we're talking about social security, what we are talking about, we all know that it is defined as a set of instruments for the prevention and management of risk involved in the lives of people in a society. It allows the coverage of basic social needs and access to essential services for well being and income security. And at the same time, we also have here, and Marina has already said this, we have a gender gap definition, which is a measure that shows the distance between women and men within respect to the same indicator. So it reflects the existing gap between sexes regarding opportunities to access and control economic, social, cultural, and political resources. Marina also shows how all gender gaps that persist in the gap within Social Security. So women, if don't have access to employment, this employment cannot be for quality. If we can work for unpaid work, can impact directly to the Social Security topic. It impacts their life quality, and what is also uh, more important for the old age leave or Social Security for old age. Identifying the gender gaps should respond for the protection floor that implies to a mandatory segment of care tax to women. So Marina showed us the care for children. So I want to insist that when we taking into account the care whether or not for children, they imply mostly for elder people. So women don't go back to the employment, but because they have to take care of the elder or children. Most of the people grow, the children grow, so the women have to take care of elder people. So this is the decision that women have to take care about this. We have to estimate and taking into account that is something that corresponds to the government. So that is why the economic and social cost for reproduction for dependent people and to a for a right, universal right for the social security, not only for the work environment, but also for a market and assistance programs. Because this social security help for women cannot see in a good way as we all want. And here we are trying to identify the causes and the gaps. But Nana and Mariana also talked about this, so I will just talk about quickly. Talking about the informal work, it doesn't have any high rates. Unpaid works is related also for these gaps, salary gaps and occupational gaps. There are the topic that are very important. If people have less income in the work environment, and we don't have the principle that the equal value income for women is not uh, similar, we can see here thinking about the patients will be less. And also we have here the occupational gaps. So if I work, we have to implement a quality, gender equality policies. So we can see here that women we do a different work, but we don't do any kind of work. So this is the occupational gaps. This kind of gaps, what is done due to the companies, are the works where women have less income and rural work also. I think that is very common for Latin America. I didn't want to write some data information about this, but I think that my panelists agree with me. In rural work is where we can see the higher inequality and lower participation for social security in women. Informal employment, that is not less important from the care topic, has accounted for between 40 and 80% of the net job for the 2020 and the third quarter of 2022. These are some ILO data from the regional office for Latin America and the Caribbean. So we can see here how women are located into the gender gap in the Social Security. This can see here about care. So the unpaid work overload as a barrier to participation in the labor market. So we can see here that all Latin America countries are here. I'm not going to analyze this. So we have many figures here. So these data have come from the CEPAL. Almost all Latin America countries are here. You can see here how the incidence of unpaid work are constituted into a barrier to participation in the labor market. This is an example of a gender salary gap in Colombia. However, we have seen huge efforts trying not to show that this is something that is maintained during the time. So we are into the 20.8%. So all people who are working on this in so many companies, we can see here that there are no reason. There is no a decision that why women have less income than men. So this is something that is very generally accepted from the population. So there is much to do to change the culture within the work environment, because they are the factors that can help us to know and how to talk about equality within genders. This is an incident that we already talked before, so I will already mention this quickly. So what happened with the employment? It affects health, income, pensions, and protection of reproductive rights. When they're unemployment, women, we don't have access to any of those topics. So also when we don't have work informality. And I will also talk about the international legal basis, because this is very interesting to see. It's very interesting to see that this main topic, as I may see a new topic, but I can see that it is not a new topic from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We are talking about the social security right for the people. This is Article 22. Now we have Article 25 that also talk that every person has the right to an adequate standard of living. Maternity and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. So we are talking about 1988 year in human rights. This topic already was involved into a population in that year. In 1976, we have to sign the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights to see that their states parties to the present covenant recognized the right of everyone or every person to Social Security, including Social Security. In 1992, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women said what we have here, that there is not different from that women have the right for Social Security. There is a right to Social Security, social health. We have to implement maternity leaves, and also we have to take into account women during maternity or pregnancy. And this is something that also Mariana or Nana mentioned before, that we have to take in account of these all protections. We only put it into women topics, because this reduction, the thought is that we have to employ women. So we have to eliminate discrimination for women that started in 1982. So the human rights have been taken into account for many years ago. So to establish into the international community, but from 1982, so we have to keep repeating these rights. The international commitment, the most important international commitment, is an international commitment that almost all countries in 2015 was made for all the development objectives. And also was about the social protection in the world that takes into account all the objectives. Then the sustainable topics, it goes into the fifth one, to empower all women and girls. And we are talking about the same thing, but the most important thing here is that we have to take in the climate change topic. So when we talk about the sustainable development topics, we forget that equality for women and gender equality, it's a main sustainable goal for a process that has to do with sustainability. We have to take into account urgent measures for the impacts that have here in this diagram to reduce inequality between countries and within the countries. It also comes into these development sustainable processes. Maybe if all the states take care of the sustainable processes, we will have a better world compromised or committed to the reduce for inequalities. Now, what to do? This is a question that I have to ask. And the answer is to putting on the gender glasses. You have to start to understand that we have equality in rights, that to have same possibilities for all people, and also that we have to think that if women are dedicated to care, if women are into the informality sector, we have to see what we are doing for this population that we are not having this progress because we are not working together within the public and government sectors to reduce inequalities. How to do it? This is the other question that we have to ask. And there is no certain answer for this. As all the previous interventions showed, there are many things to do. For a resume for these things is as follows. I love the things that we saw with Mariana for the construction of data that can allow us to know what are indicators, to know what we're looking for. So the information or the data are not only for the experts, or for us as experts that we are studying these topics, but also for all countries that have to use these all information to know what to follow this phenomenon, and also to know if in a certain period they are able to change this. Other thing that have to help us to close these gaps is the health topic. We haven't talked about the entrepreneurship topic for a state or government support. This is very important. The way that the informality sector cannot stop to have entrepreneurship from women. In all Latin America, there are many imagination. They are willing to work. And women, we can see here in Colombia, women entrepreneurship are very creative, and they have many things to share, and that can be shared for our society and for their own. And last and not in that is important, when we are talking about education, it is not only for education for women to have a same opportunities, but it's education for all society to understand that there is not only some topics that are dedicated to a certain experts or certain sectors, but all together have to understand that girls can learn mathematics, technology, or sciences. Uh, this is that where they start education of the difference. This education has to be constant and continued. Most of the problems of technology is that we have to be prepared for technology and have to be updated from technology. But if care tasks are into women and stop the gap or the opportunity to have the technology opportunities, we have to work better for the gender gap stop, and we have to start by education. In the same education as we saw before in the Caribbean, women doesn't work in the construction. This is a paradigm, and this is something that no one can work about this. When people ask themselves why, and there are so there are many things that we can discover that women can do many things within construction area, and these opportunities of job opportunities can be provided for both women and men. And all those things putting together, going to the social security, and that can have a difference from the world for the future, different future for the population. It is not only a work for governments, it is also, as we mentioned before, is for some policies for to close gender gaps, but also a sector area. The public sector have a great commitment. Yeah, we already mentioned that we have the gender gap have to be closed. But if we see this in this way, but if we all work together, if we all not being committed to have a reference, a good topic, an important topic, there is a level of flexible work for women and men. During COVID-19, many people can work from their homes. And this happened in great cities was a great opportunity because they don't have to work in the office or on site, and they have to take care of the children of the other of their things. So what we have to do here is to look for the other 8 hours to know if exactly we have working 8 hours. Because if work is flexible, there are more opportunities that men and women can understand the importance to be compatible for work that we do together, and to provide all the rights for the commitment to know that we have to provide the information for to know to provide a good processes or provisions for to a family construction. Many women have commitment for work, to education, and other education that are unrelated to work. And we don't have flexibility in the job world. We can lose talents within women, and also we can lose employees, and we take more value for other things. As we can see here, for the presentation we can saw here before, women who has the first child, they leave the work. So I think that we have to rethink that if this flexibility is possible, and if we can provide it or provide it for both women and men. It is not exclusively to help women, but also to give the opportunity for men in gender equality, to acknowledge that they also have responsibility, not only for the production for work, but also for human rights, and they can work together for human equality. The next slide, please. And I also want to conclude with this phrase that we cannot continue to ignore the gender gap. We must work together to bridge the gap and create a more secure and equitable work for everyone. Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you very much for your panelists. And I hope that I could provide you a good information for this closing. Thank you very much, Dr. Bustamante, for your presentation. That is basically the topic in this table that we talk about the definitions. And we cannot forget that the social security is a human right. We cannot forget that to be universally, no one can go put out from the system. So we have to bridge the gap, gender gap, and create a discussion from any perspective, as you mentioned, from the politic provisions, and also for the private sectors, and also from the study center. So we have to be part of this discussion um, to enhance the bridge for the gender gap. Thank you very much for participants. Since we don't have any questions, I invite you all assistants if you want to ask something to our panelists. If we don't have any questions, I will give all my of the panelists if you have something to conclude here. You have only 5 minutes. Dr. Martini? I was not prepared for this. I would like to thank you. It was a pleasure to listen to other panelists. And also for this closure done by Marta was wonderful. About social security systems in the region, and also for what we have to work. We have to highlight here. We have to highlight here about the last topic. Why I and my participation is this private sector role in the commitment for the society. To have consciousness that this gender gap problems is not only a problem for women, it's only a problem for society together. So it's a problem that we have to decide as society and how we are tackled for the reproduction, for the information of the population and reproduction or economic reproduction. So we will also want to work together because this is a qualitative manner to develop a sustainable way, as Marta mentioned before. I only have to say this. Thank you very much, and I put this space here to answer some questions. See, my some panelists want to add something. Thank you very much. Yeah, there are some questions here. We have a question. As employer, what recommendations you can provide to enhance conditions to mothers in the work environment? I only have 2 questions. Do you want to answer this first question? Some of you want to answer? Yes, I want to answer this. I think that in the employment world, there are many things to do. What we have to do here is to see work that we have a productive unity where all together can participate, and the flexibility is important. It doesn't mean that we have to have less hours for work hours, but we have to create a good work environments, unhealthy work environments where no one cannot see that they have to take care of their parents because they are in the treatment. So I have to take my child, have to receive school processes, but that can be the same for men and women. And many companies doing many works for many companies. Some men told me that they don't ask for permission for their children occupations. So the response from my boss was, "What is your women doing? Your spouse doing?" So we have to work a lot in companies to break for the paradigm that care works are responsible. Family responsibilities are not only responsible for women. And I think that, and I see it every day in some companies that create healthy environments where there is certain flexibility, where all people can ask for certain things, people are more productive. I'm sorry, can I add something for this? Yes, this is something to do, well, we talked before for the leave designed. Some policies have to guarantee the rights. They have also to consolidate changes into society. So we have here responsibility changes that we have to tackle, but I can see here there are a men that want to ask for a permission to take care of their children. It's difficult. So we can see here that there must have a leave policies, not only for women, but also for women that they have to take care of the children after they get birth. So after these 3 months of the child was born, women don't have, there's nothing to do with biology. So we need a leave for also for men that can be transferable for men. So there will be a history inertia that the care is only involved provided for women. So we have to work in the responsibility for men also. When men ask for permission, they can receive the same answer for women. So if men receive the answer, what does your spouse do? So these men have to do something different. So there will be a right where men can take certain days to take care of the children, either because they have sick children or sick parents. Yeah, this is very important, this responsibility topic that also we have here in the discussion. Hey, Ms. Anna, would you like to add something? Sure.
Yes, okay. It's a very good question. And I think that as first, you have to look at the institutions that these women are working in. I recommend that private sector working places should have a gender human resource policy. This policy will ensure that there is transparency in gender and decision making. In other words, you're starting at the leadership level, making it gender responsive. And that leadership then will address gender imbalances that exist within the organization. It can then go on to create gender equitable and inclusive workplace environment. This could be making sure that women have flexible time, making sure that men have enough paternity leave to support either, as Mariana shared, to support either their partners, their spouses, or even their parents who might be ill and need attention. You also want an inclusive and equitable workspace that makes sure that all your documents as an institution have a gender lens, are gender responsive. You want to make sure that policies do not discriminate against anyone and is inclusive. You also want to make sure that you're operating in an environment where gender equality and inclusivity is adhered to by all. In other words, the whole organization is trained on what it means to be an organization that is gender responsive and promotes gender equality. And of course, as an organization, all your data, all your monitoring and evaluation have to look at basically getting sex disaggregated data so you can address any inequalities that exist. You can also look at your data from a gender perspective, where you can drill down to other issues that affect women, that affect men, that affect mothers, that affect parents. So that is my proposal that I would put forward. And I'm sharing this because we just worked on a gender and human resource policy for Belize Waterworks, the first in our region. And it's quite an innovative thing that they're doing. And I'm very pleased that it's a predominantly male sector that is pushing for this, thanks to the support of the Caribbean Development Bank that financed it. Thank you.
We have another question that is from Eugenia Rondan. Thank you very much for your joiners that we are seeing here. Taking into account non-paid work is recognized as non-productive work, and we don't have an employer here. And also, Social Security is still goes into labor policies, so unpaid work is work still. And people who are working in that sector are not recognized as workers. So how can that can be recognized from the Social Security protection? Someone want to answer this question? Uh, the topic about care and care remuneration. It's a public policy. It is a topic that we have here that we in every country. I don't know if Inanna or Marina have another information here, but I think that there are no a country that can recognize the time that women apply in their house dedicated to household task that can provide for Social Security pensions. So I don't know this. So we are working on it. What happened here is that we are studying on it to have care systems allowing women to go back to the workplace. And the state can provide her some procurement for her to take care in the house. Yes, I agree with Marta. I don't think that any case goes into this topic due to for the fiscal sustainability. What is linked, Social Security is linked to the work environment, so we have to be more ingenious. So what I know here, I think that the most productive solution and integral solution for this equality is to look for to substitute substitutes for to take care of parents or childhood. For example, as I mentioned before, for nurseries or some others. In Argentina, what happened here in Argentina is something unsustainable from a fiscal point of view. So, by recognizing a household task from women who all their lives have taken care of other people, but haven't worked before, so they have the right for the pension. We have here 3 or 2 laws. And I also want to add a note. There is a study about the participation in market labor for women, for them, and how they can be empowered, being independent, how they have capacity to make decisions for their own lives. There has been analyzed. So the first proposal here was the divorce rate. So talking about the women who were not happy in their with their spouses, so because they weren't independent from economically independent. So this is something, just an example to show about this topic. So it is important autonomy via the employment, and after this, Social Security for women. Thank you very much. Ms. Nana, would you like to add something? Or can we?
I understood the question clearly and through the interpretation, we're looking at how we quantify care work for Social Security, correct? Okay, great. Now, for us to be able to even recognize care work, unpaid care work, as valuable, we need to measure it. That means part of our labor force surveys and part of our statistical surveys that we do within the Ministry of Social, the departments for statistics, need to measure care work. Once states start measuring unpaid care work, then we will see the value numerically, or even how much time people take to do care work. Then we can put policies in place. I believe that if, sadly, governments like data to the extent that when it tells a story, if we use a lot of, we know care work, unpaid care work exists, but when they see how much of unpaid care work goes into someone's daily life and be able to pay attention to it, bring together, take a holistic approach, bring together the state, bring together the private sector, bring together civil society to see how this can be addressed. Are they going to put policies in place then that mitigates someone who is working but is not recognized as work by the state, that some sort of a measure is put in place, some sort of a social safety net? I'm thinking a special social safety net, just like how when you have a vulnerability or any vulnerable situation that occurs and persons are then assisted through this program. We could think about that, but it is not something that I believe can be just a state intervention. This requires consultations at the national level, and each country will be unique because each country faces different realities. And so that will be my contribution. But I think it is definitely a very, very excellent question that needs to be addressed because unpaid care work is such a big burden in our region, that is Latin America and the Caribbean. And we need to start looking at it from a position that not only assists those who are vulnerable to it, not being able to have some sort of a pension, as Mariana and Martha were saying, but rather to see how we can also engage others to see the benefit of the work that they do and why contributions and policies and programs and systems should be put in place to address that. Thank you.
Only add something that is related to Anna's comment. We have to measure work care time and also to measure unpaid work. There are many things here in the region, but they are still limited. There are time-used surveys. There are some surveys that are very expensive to continue doing. So no other countries have enough time, and they are not enough to make a study for. This is the first diagnosis element to take into account, as Nana mentioned before. So we have to measure how many times do men and women dedicated to all those activities, no unpaid activities. So care is something, but we have many things to take into account. Also childhood care, and also old age care or disability care, and other kind of services for society. So there are many database things that we elaborate. So we have many data here. So we still have to still working, where many pieces that are left. And we have to tackle this as soon as possible. There is a question for Dr. Bustamante. Can you mention if some private companies already established some programs, as you mentioned before? How can I work, or from where can we work to implement some that kind of programs to modify culture in work here? Yes, at this moment in Colombia, with the help to the ILO and also for the UN Program for the Development, there are two methodologies. The first one is the PNUR, which is called Equivar Seal, which is to establish in a company a management equality gender system that it works as a seal of a based work, for example. The ILO had a productivity program that was called a SCORE program. And the ILO SCORE program comes for the MIGA score. It's a small program. It is not a seal, but this is a address to small companies. But also, this is an invitation to have a management system for the commitments to measure. So, what we are committed for, and what are the progress into taking into account the good practices, and also for the international ILO agreements. So the salary payment, gender violence in the organizations, that women can participate into decision making into small and big companies. And also for the methodology for the mini score, my recommendation that I am applying to management systems is that companies can start to receive many information before they take action, because gender equality in this time, or at this time, as we mentioned before, have many opportunities. Many people who are working on this, but every company have to decide what they need the most for the productivity, and their commitment for the quality can work together. So there is no exact formula. There is no exact formula. So we have to receive many informations to know the company, the organization, and to meet all the needs. And I'm convinced that the part of the change is in the companies. Thank you very much, Marta. The last question. In the work environment, women have to tackle vertical segregation, that have difficulty to go up into a leadership or management job occupation. So in what part of the region we have to find some measures or policies that can help to bridge this gap? Can I start answering? I don't have a list of countries, so I can just provide some examples of policies that can be provided. When we are talking about the bridge of the gaps, there are two consequences or two causes. First one is the discrimination. There is something here that the one who decided to give a higher occupation positions, it's applied for men. So we have to look for solutions to how to control it. To help for this, we have to provide an efficient politic in the long term. Quotas look for equity in different positions. For example, here in Argentina, there are some quotas in a private sector, in certain occupations in the private sector. When they have a list for the election for deputies, they have to be similar as for women and men. So if we think that women are prepared, or the education was prepared expectations in a world that was very difficult to access for those management positions, it is probably that when this quota is established, we are not very prepared for this. So this quota that allows that women can have being a more incentive for the future generations, so they are prepared for those higher occupation levels. So now, when we have 50% of men and 50% of men, you immediately have equality. But sometimes people don't think that women have the capacity as men to have these higher occupations. So we have to integrate a policy that can work better in this mechanic field. So we have to look for the level of talents for women to have these higher occupations. It is not only for discrimination, but also there is also a aspect that comes from the own decisions from men and women in a context that we described already, where women is in charge for the society imposes responsibilities of care, where we imply women ask why I'm going to do in this company. So I have to work for the main tasks as mother or in my house. So to tackle for this, we have to go back to the same discussion before. So we have to provide some policies for both women and men, for either of them want to go into higher positions to tackle discrimination that also generate crystal robes.
So I'm assuming the question was on how to women's leadership. Am I correct?
Yes.
General? Okay, wonderful. In the workplace, I think, Mariana, you hit it on the nail, in that there are different root causes that sometimes do not allow women to make it into leadership positions. If these issues are not addressed, so for instance, if the policies within the workplace is not flexible, that women can be able to navigate the triple role that they play. Some women pass leadership positions and don't want to take it because it will be too much work on them. That's number one. Number two, when the organization is not gender sensitive, is not gender responsive in its thinking and in its progression, it makes decisions that are discriminatory. So Mariana and Victor are in the same job. Mariana is single, has no family, but Victor has a family. They are both equally good on the job. But it will be said, Victor has a family. He needs more money. Give him the raise or give him the promotion and let him take that job. Is that fair? No, it's not. If she is a better worker than he is, she should be given the job, not because he has a family and she is single. And so we need to look at these issues that takes place within the organization. And I believe it also has to stem from the fact that, you know, our socialization has to be addressed as well. Because the gender norms and the biases that exist within our society make some women, one, don't want to take up leadership positions because they feel impelled that they have to take the triple role because they don't have the support they need to be able to function effectively. Now, if society was a little bit more sensitized and more gender responsive, she wouldn't even have to think about that because she would know she would get the support she needs and she'll actually be encouraged also to take up leadership positions. And so I always come up with my three-pronged approach. Civil society has to do its work within the community to educate, to sensitize. Government has to put policies in place and encourage private sector and the state sector to have policies in place that is gender responsive and promotes equality. And of course, once the state has something in place, then private sector can, because it has to be a trickle-down effect. And most of our governments have signed on to conventions that actually calls for these things to take place. And so it has to now trickle down where academia, and other sources can also advocate for not only the state to put things in place, but also for private sector to put things in place. And civil society can also work with the society on a whole to sensitize them. I hope I wasn't too fast for the interpreter. I got a little passionate about it.
Thank you very much, Nana. Dr. Bustamante, would you like to add something else? I think she doesn't want to add something. I would like to thank you very much to accept this invitation. I think that has been a very interesting discussion. That you have shared a topics that give us an important reflection that from the CIESS we are interested to work into our training programs into this topic. We hope to keep working together with you within this topic, and I thank you for all assistance. I invite you to keep in contact with us in the website or social media and diffusion links from the CIESS. You can find our academic programs and other kind of activities where you can find some webinars related to social security topics. And on behalf of our Executive Director, Emilio Carrasco, I appreciate your assistance and also all the team involved into this activity. Thank you very much.